This is part 2 of my thoughts on the discussion between Earthling Ed and Jed, the self-described libertarian. Obviously, if you haven't seen part 1, check that out first.
What about in cultures where, let's say, homosexuality is illegal? Is homosexuality immoral in those cultures because it's illegal?
Well, that's also why I don't believe in moral systems personally. I believe that they are societal constructs.
So is homosexuality immoral in societies where the construct is that it's illegal?
In that society, they have constructed themselves in that way that, yes.
What do you think?
I support homosexuality fully.
So you support homosexuality, but in a culture where it's illegal, you think it's acceptable. Do you? Don't want to put words in your mouth. But so they should be challenged then.
I support challenging them. Yes.
Right.
He's very confused. I don't even know what to say to that. He supports challenging those laws. So clearly he does believe that homosexuality is not a sin, but also in those cultures, because it is seen as a sin and because legally it is, then it's immoral to engage in homosexual practices. Again, it's like might is right, but also not, because we should challenge those laws as well. It's very confusing.
Okay, so outside of cultures and outside of laws, we now accept that just because something is cultural or something is legal or illegal doesn't mean that it is moral or immoral, and we should challenge things regardless of their cultural or legal status.
You have the right and capacity to challenge them peacefully.
Okay, peacefully. Okay.
So you have the right to challenge it peacefully, but there's no moral obligation to, I think is what he's saying. Although he would support that peaceful opposition. But if the anti-homosexual laws stayed in place, he'd be fine with that too, I guess. Okay.
So when it comes to animals then, for you, in your personal opinion, is there any moral consideration that a non-human animal deserves? Do they deserve anything? Any consideration at all?
They do not deserve anything, no. We can give them, but anything that we give them is grace. It is not something that they intrinsically deserve.
Why do humans intrinsically deserve moral consideration?
Because we are creating the society amongst ourselves.
But again, only some of us are. Again, there are people who cannot actively participate, in his own words. He really can't continue to use that argument. He needs to come up with another way in which humans are so unique, so special, that it makes it okay to kill other sentient beings because we want to.
Okay, but what is it about being human that means that we deserve more? Because that's not deserving, that's not intrinsic. You're saying that value to a human is created based on the society that we've created. But what about in environments where they haven't created the societies that we have? Is there something intrinsic about a human that means that we deserve value or should be viewed with value?
I think that we as humans can be more accepting, but in technicality, for example, within the United States, I believe that somebody who does not have a direct affiliation with the United States, be they, like you said, a work visa, or be they a permanent resident, or be they a citizen, technically they do not have any rights in the United States. You could argue something with like the United Nations, but they technically do not have any rights in the United States. But I think that we would be more favorable to them.
Well, how gracious of you, sir. You don't have any rights, but, we'll be merciful. We'll allow you to exist in the U.S. and not just murder you, I guess. Jesus, dude.
Ultimately, humans have a potential to interact with human societies in a way that a wolf does not. The way that we, as wolves would not give us the rights.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter. That's irrelevant about what wolves would or wouldn't do. It's about what we do with the intelligence that we have. And again, I bring it back to the question I asked earlier. What about a human who has a cognitive impairment that means that they can't engage in society in the way that we're talking, that they can't engage in the things that we're discussing, that you say assign humans worth? Do those people not deserve moral consideration as well because they can't engage in the way that we're talking about?
I mean, they are definitely affiliated with I would say that they are affiliated with our society.
They're affiliated with humans. They're allies.
If they have like residency, or if they have like just a legal affiliation with the United States, then they are subject to all of the laws and protections afforded by the United States.
So a human being's moral worth is based on the legal protections assigned to them as citizens of the United States. So before citizenship,
the objective worth. Now, personally, we can have differences, and we did discuss the whole argument of like a society which is homophobic.
Yes.
And I certainly respect your opinion that you can be that like veganism is moral, and I am not going to challenge it. I'm not going to say that you are wrong.
Okay.
I am just saying that we can coexist.
I think when it comes to humans, what means that we have moral worth isn't the laws that are granted to US citizens. It's to do with basic things such as sentience, consciousness, the capacity to experience.
Okay, so that was pretty long. I don't want to play his entire video. That makes me feel weird. I don't know. You guys should go watch the debate, support his channel, watch his stuff. But basically, he goes back to necessity. He doesn't believe it's a legal issue. Ed doesn't believe legality really has anything to do with it, that stabbing the person is wrong because, again, unnecessary suffering.
The same is true of the animals. Stabbing them to death and cutting their throats is wrong because it's unnecessary for me to do it and for you to do it. And it is a non-consensual thing that harms them for a needless reason. They too have sentience and consciousness and the capacity to experience.
I do believe that they have the capacity to feel, and I do also believe that we actually underestimate their intelligence, and but I will also say that, and this is the biologist starting to come in, the cerebral cortex, ultimately we have a greater ability to think conceptually, to think abstractly, which is why we're even having this discussion right now.
That's great.
Than any other species, which
does that justify arbitrarily harming them? Because we're saying might makes right. Because we have these cognitive advancements, because we're intellectually superior, we therefore have the right to dominate. Do you think that's true? Does intelligence and power create the moral justification to tyrannize?
Well, ultimately, that is the question of human history, isn't it?
It is, and unfortunately, human history is fraught of examples of why that shouldn't be the case.
And it's still an ongoing conversation amongst humans.
I don't know if it's unfortunate to him or not. Again, his whole argument has kind of been might makes right, which again is not typically associated with libertarianism.
Is veganism, is this the pressing issue when we still have so many cases of human rights? Is this the conversation that we should be having? Should we not perhaps wait until we have our house in order?
I mean, I would love to hear more about his thoughts on might makes right, but I guess we're moving on to this. I already basically talked about this in the last one, in the other Earthling Ed debate. What I'll add is, number one, I think a lot of people spend time on things that are not as worthy in terms of how efficient they are, how far their dollars go toward helping to reduce suffering. 80,000 Hours has a really good article on the world's biggest problems, again, from people who think about charity and fixing things in a very consequence-driven way. So not just, someone's dog has cancer, I'm going to donate $20. I mean, I get it. It feels right, but it's probably not the best use of those $20. But yeah, factory farming tends to be up there as far as one of the top priorities. So in terms of, the harms going on in the world, animal welfare is a very good one to focus on. There's a lot of opportunity there to reduce a lot of suffering. And as Ed said in the last one, we can do both. We can focus on animals and improving animal quality of life and convincing people to stop eating meat, while also advocating for causes that are more human directed, and other causes that aren't, like AI sentience, which is probably going to be one of those things that is very important. But again, I guess Jed would not care about AI sentience.
Well, I don't think we'll ever have our house in order, unfortunately.
Oh, come on, Ed. Be a little more optimistic.
Point is, social justice issues aren't mutually exclusive. You can be in favour of multiple social justice issues and campaign on behalf of multiple social justice issues as well. It's not an either-or scenario. The thing about veganism is what we consume is passive. And what I mean by that is we have to eat. We don't have that's non-negotiable. Yeah. So to be vegan just means the 3 times a day where we eat meals, if we eat something else, right, now we can go and campaign on behalf of all these other issues that need campaign on behalf of. But if we just make that small change, we can not only reduce animal suffering significantly, but also human suffering.
So exactly what I said in the last one, that I think she was making the argument for workers' rights. How is that stopping you? How is being vegan stopping you from advocating for workers' rights? And in terms of other individual actions we can take, I mean, nothing really compares to veganism. Giving up your car. If you're flying a lot, that would make a huge difference if you stop doing that. If you want to make a huge difference with your own individual actions and you don't have a shit ton of money to like donate, veganism is your answer.
We need to attack all of these things, but we shouldn't just discount something because there is something else.
Just to push back a little bit, I think you can. Again, we have limited resources, we have limited time and money, so I think we should focus on the most impactful things. That's what effective altruism is really about. I think many of us could do much better as far as focusing our energy on the things that matter most and the things that improve people's and animals' lives the most. But certainly that doesn't mean that if you're advocating against factory farming, you can't do anything else. You can't have saturation, right? You can't have oversaturation where a lot of money is being pumped into something, and maybe it would be more useful to take that, even if it is a good cause, to take that money and put it into something else that is underfunded. But I don't think there's any sign that that's happening with the animal rights movement.
I still do believe that the societally agreed pleasure of a human comes before the pleasure of an animal.
It's not about the pleasure of the animal. It's about their entire existence. It's about their life. It's about everything that they have, everything that's precious and valuable to them. We're saying that our pleasure is more important than their very being. And not only our pleasure, but 15 minutes of pleasure, more valuable than someone else's entire life and existence. Everything that they hold valuable to them, gone for 15 minutes of a 30% difference in taste pleasure.
When you talk about the life, and actually, this actually brings me to perhaps the environment ecology, and what happens many times is if you remove a predator.
Okay, so he's just not going to respond to that at all. He's just not going to talk about taste preference and morality. I mean, I think ultimately he would say that, I don't know. I don't know what he would say. I don't know what he would say.
If the predator species dies off, then the people, the ones that would, I guess you could call them victims, and they are victims of like the predators of the high chain. They run rampant, and actually their own goods, they actually eat themselves out of nutrients, and actually it ends up being bad for the entire environment. So is it possible that, would you perhaps, do you believe that there is a possibility humans have a role in the predatory chain?
I did not know where he was going with that. So he's arguing, or I guess he's not arguing, he's asking whether or not, I guess if we weren't eating animals, that they would just run rampant, and that the outcome would actually be worse than us farming them and eating them. The animals we're eating, we're breeding. If we stop breeding them, they won't exist. That doesn't mean we're going to lose a bunch of species or anything. Again, I have a whole video on that for people interested. We're not just going to let all the cows go and keep breeding the cows and then just let them all run wild. I don't know.
Well, not in the agricultural system that we have, because these are animals that we farm are either artificially bred by humans using their hands, or we facilitate the breeding and existence and procreation of these animals. Actually, wildlife and the natural world would flourish if we eliminated this incredibly harmful aspect of what we do, for industries and for consumption.
I don't know about wildlife flourishing, because there's lots of other things we do that affect wildlife and affect habitats. And again, I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. But certainly if someone is trying to argue that this is just our role in the food chain and it's natural, the way we eat meat and animal byproducts is natural, okay.
The reason why people can talk about like veganism legitimately being able to supplement you is because you are capable of having artificial proteins and supplements that would naturally come either from an animal or from an animal product, since veganism is also about the elimination of utilizing animal products. But what about for humans who cannot afford these supplements, especially the ones of the best quality?
I hear where you're going. Just want to stop you very quickly. Just on the artificial protein thing, we don't need to consume artificial proteins. We don't take protein supplements. You can take protein powders, but that's not a vegan, non-vegan thing. Lots of non-vegans have protein powders, and you get more than enough protein from whole plant food. So protein, no. Supplements, yes, you do want to have a supplement, and that supplement would maybe be like a B12 or like a vitamin D, which we should all have. Maybe less so in California, but generally speaking, most people should have a vitamin D supplement, vegan or non-vegan. When it comes to supplement quality, there's really not much discrepancy in quality, and you can get supplements that are less expensive than a piece of red meat, for example.
The big issue is when you come across the more natural stuff, the herbal stuff. Often it does not have what it says it has, or if you are trying to take like really high dose stuff for some reason. I mean, obviously, if a doctor has instructed you, that's one thing, but a lot of people think that more is better, and they take these like high dose, super active, however they label them, I forgot how they're labeled, multivitamins that have like way more vitamin A, for instance, than your average multi, which can be bad for you. Typically, if you're just buying like a B12 supplement, just get whatever cheap B12 supplement you can find from the store.
The more pressing issue is what you were saying about people that can't afford it. Not that can't afford a supplement, because the supplements, in terms of value and expense is no different to buying, most things.
I mean, that's a good argument. B12 supplements are way cheaper than meat. Like way cheaper. But also, like, where's this coming from? Why is he bringing up people being able to afford it or not? What does that have to do with libertarianism?
I recognize that on your grounds, it is unacceptable, but ultimately I have different grounds. I have a different worldview.
What are your grounds then? Define those. You may have already done it, but just for the point of this, reiterate what your grounds are.
My grounds are that in this, as humans, we form society because we realize that we are all better off if we work together, and that we can create our own goods. At the agricultural revolution, we are better off if we aren't worrying of somebody every night coming and just taking an evening's meal from us and our lives along with it. So that is ultimately the beginnings of society, and the freer a society, the more people are able to interact. I believe that we are actually better off. But ultimately, I believe that humans are sovereign, and that we have the greatest abilities, and that if we did not, we would be proven wrong and the animals would have destroyed us.
Again, might makes right. He's totally fine with an alien race coming down, and instead of being friendly, they are quite aggressive, and they decide, we're smarter than you, so you're our food now. Because that's what it sounds like to me, that they would be in the right, and we're food now. I don't know. I'm not okay with that. I don't want to be food. Maybe that's his kink. Maybe he wants to be food.
Because when we talk about issues of morality, it's always important that we keep challenging ourselves and learning from our past behaviors.
I do agree with that.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that.
It just sounds like such a weak position to have, that he agrees, he believes there are certain things in other cultures that are illegal but actually should be legal, but he's not going to do anything about it, and just hope that one day the culture changes and that the law changes. I mean, that is very libertarian. It's a very hands-off approach. Like, yeah, gay rights, but I'm not gonna do anything to facilitate that, and I don't want the government to get involved. And if some business wants to deny serving gay people, even if it's grocery stores, even if every single grocery store in the country denies service to gay people, I'm not going to do anything about it. Hopefully the law will change one day. What? And again, typically a libertarian would say, no, the law should not change in that regard, that grocery stores, that any store, any person should be able to deny anyone for any reason. It seems like a very weak approach to morality, to law, to humanity. To any issue, really.
I think we need to look beyond just these societal constructs. We need to look at something a little bit more intrinsic. And I think that intrinsic is empathy and moral agency. And whilst we could be, and I'm going to use the word pedantic, I'm not saying that you are being pedantic, but I think maybe you are being a bit pedantic. We could be pedantic and create this kind of construct that defines our morality. But ultimately, I think when it boils down to it, when we see situations of harm and suffering, that's not the rationalization that we have. when we see situations of harm and suffering, we empathize with those enduring that harm and suffering. And that's why I think we can understand that it's wrong, because we can understand what they're going through. So I think empathy is the cornerstone to creating a better society.
And we see what happens when people don't have empathy. I mean, some of the worst atrocities, most of the worst atrocities are committed by people with very low empathy. That doesn't mean empathy is the end-all be-all. I think you can be too empathetic and it can inhibit your ability to be rational. Again, like the dog with cancer, whatever example I gave, where it's like, oh my God, if I see someone wants to help their dog or whatever, I mean, yeah, you want to give that money because, oh my God, it's a dog. But again, rationally, not the best use of that money.
But even as an individual, although you may not feel a benefit within your own life for, the destabilization of, animal exploitation, the betterment to society comes from reducing suffering. And when we acknowledge that, I think suffering breeds suffering, and violence can breed violence. Slaughterhouse workers have mental health problems. They can become increasingly violent because of the work that they do. Society is negatively impacted by what we do to animals. And I don't think that we'll ever have a world, which I think we probably both want, which is just a nicer world, right? I don't think we will ever have that while we have facilities and places where we knowingly put billions, trillions of sentient animals through a process that we know consciously causes them pain and ultimately takes their life.
So number one, I think talking to a libertarian about altruism, and again, if they're more objectivist, which he's not, I'm not sure what exactly he believes, but I think that's a harder sell, do this for the animals. I think you need to be more self-interest oriented and really focus on the ways in which factory farming in particular harms people and harms society. I mean, zoonotic diseases, pandemics. But then Ed goes into kind of, I don't know, does he? I mean, he's saying a nicer world, what we both want, implying that a nicer world for people, implying that we can't have that while we're still, killing animals and putting them in these horrible, horrible situations and then slaughtering them for food. It's an argument that some vegans make more directly. All of the atrocities are connected, and that we'll never have, we'll never get rid of bigotry towards humans, among humans, until we get rid of animal exploitation, which I just think that's a hard thing to sell. I think there is no proof for that whatsoever. The unfortunate thing about humans is that we can compartmentalize, that we can love and be very compassionate to some and be absolutely horrible to others. And it's about expanding our circle. We could have a far more peaceful society towards humans while still exploiting and treating certain animals terribly. Just like we can care deeply about certain people and find other people, basically subhuman, because a lot of how we operate is not particularly rational, and it's not focused on reducing suffering. It's focused on reducing suffering for a select few. But again, we can expand that circle without expanding it all the way to animals.
I think that we have a long way to go in terms of human relations and human societies, and I think that maybe this may sound like a kick the can down the road argument, but I believe that we would be better served focusing on our own species, and even within that, like the subunits of our own species, like our own societies, and then eventually our own species before we start considering others. But I do believe that we can have these conversations on a broader scale, policy scale, a couple centuries down the line.
A couple of centuries. I certainly hope that that's not the case.
By kicking the can to everyone else, right? He's not going to play a role in any of this, whether it's helping animals or helping humans. He's just going to wait for the culture to change and for the laws to change. Cool.
Could it not be that for you, when you buy food, you just buy plant-based food and then put all of your energy into focusing on these other issues and focusing on creating better societies and better relationships for interpersonal relationships between humans? Could you not just eat vegan 3 times a day when you eat and then focus all of your other energy on these interpersonal relationships that you clearly care about and are of course very important?
No, because he doesn't want to.
Just a small thing that you could do that just negates that aspect but then doesn't take away from you being able to do everything else that you care about.
I could, and I know this will sound cold to you, but ultimately I don't want to, and I feel that there is no obligation. But I feel that we could as a society agree that there is a moral obligation once we have our house mostly in order.
Wow. If everyone thought like him, I mean, would there be any advocacy whatsoever? We would just all be sitting around waiting for someone else to get started. Not the way I want to live. And I'm glad there are so many people who do not think like that.
If there is a harm, there is a victim who's been harmed as a consequence of that want, the want in and of itself shouldn't make it morally permissible. Okay, maybe we'll leave. Thanks, Jed.
Right.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. Have a great life as well, by the way.
Yes,
We'll probably never
you
see
too.
each other again. All right, bye, Jed. Bye.
I don't know why that's so funny. We'll probably never see each other again. Bye. Obviously, a much more respectful conversation than the one with, I forgot her name, but from the indigenous culture one. Aside from all his weird and not very compassionate and weak arguments, was very, very respectful and listened to what Ed was saying. Didn't always respond to what Ed was saying, and there wasn't any eye rolling or anything like that. So that was nice. In some ways, very libertarian. In some ways, not at all. The focus on government and legality is not very libertarian, but the hands-off approach to things, absolutely. And again, overall, I thought Ed did a really, really great job. I wish he had asked about like a superior, species and how that would look. And I would love to see how Jed would respond to that. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Like the video if you did. Subscribe. Click the bell if you want to be notified when I upload. You can support the channel, patreon.com/unnaturalvegan. I do upload 2 exclusive videos there a month for $5 plus patrons, just talking about whatever, sometimes extra little background stuff on videos I've done or extra thoughts I have, but usually it's just like pregnancy and home life kind of related stuff. Anyway, thank you again. New video soon.